Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Kevin Michel. I am back again with another video. If you do not know who I am a producer, musician, singer-songwriter. I do sync as well as produce for different artists. On my page, I've been tracking my sync journey, and it's been super fun. And quick shout out to everybody that's been signing up for one-to-one sessions. It's been like really fun, and just really cool to see where everybody's at. And I'm glad I can, help in some way, because again, I know I mentioned in my other videos that sometimes sync is really just, it's kind of the unknown. Even though it's been around, I feel like everyone has questions on how to get in. And so again, if you find any value, I do have some videos on sync, on, arranging, and just trying to get into the mindset of creating for sync. So, again, if you have any interest, of joining or just, reaching out to me to look at your tracks and give you feedback and just, give you some type of, encouragement to join sync and to, start up. My link is in the description if you are interested in that. All right, so today we're going to talk about, is sync worth it? Is, production music, is it worth getting into as an artist, as a producer or composer? Is it worth it? My short answer is definitely yes, but I'm going to break this down into two categories, the pros and cons, right? So, I mean, the cons aren't really horrible things, but I feel like there are things that you should just know before getting into this industry. All right, so the first con, and something that you kind of need to know, again, this is not horrible stuff, but again, it's just things that you need to know. So the first con I'm going to say is sync is hard to really get into when you're first starting out. Not because it's like extremely hard, because the talent level is super hard, but it's more so like, as a producer, you gotta really produce a certain way and understand structure, understand dynamics, understand like mood and feeling. That I think is kind of hard to adapt to, coming from just producing regular music. I think that's probably the hardest adjustment, because you're not catering to an artist. You're catering to a scene. You're catering to, and most of the times you don't see what the scene is. So that's probably the hardest thing to kind of do, is you're literally at your computer creating for a brief that just says, hey, we need positive, upbeat pop music. And you don't know how that's going to be used, what that scene is going to look like, what TV show or maybe film or ad will use it. So I mean, some briefs may have specific, details about who's using it. But for the most part, you're not aware of who's doing what with your music. So I think that's the hardest thing when you're getting into, sync, because you're seeing firsthand like how things are different. Like when you're creating a hip hop track, it's not just a loop, with a 808 and a hi-hat. There are dynamics, there are things that you got to drop, put in, and understanding how to create a track that's going to be, suitable for sync. My second con, and something you need to know when you're getting into sync, is that music supervisors are the worst, in my opinion. Some people may have different opinions, but a music supervisor is probably the worst way to go when you're first starting out. I know this was like a big thing when, for me, like a few years when I first started hearing about sync. I know that was the main way, or, a lot of people were doing it that way, where they would watch the credits after a show and then see who the music supervisor was, and then getting in contact with them, which is still a good way. But I think when you're first starting out, it's really tough to really understand the language, how to email properly, some of the things that a music supervisor may be looking for. Because when you're first starting out, you're just thinking, I want my music on TV. And you can come off as needy, as entitled for a music supervisor. So I think when you're first starting out, that's the worst way to go. Again, that is my honest opinion. I went down that route and it was like super hard, and I barely got any responses back. So if you're not familiar, again, most of the people are watching shows, getting in, trying to find the email, trying to find a working email for a lot of these supervisors, and reaching out, and then making sure your email structure is appealing to these music supervisors, and then sending your music. Obviously that sounds great, but you could be waiting for years, if that, for a response back, because these supervisors are extremely busy. I know right now in particular there's a strike going on, so there's less time. So maybe this is a good opportunity for a composer or producer. That's actually not a bad idea. I'm thinking about that now. I might do that, but that is the hardest route. When everything picks back up, that is the hardest route, because these guys are getting millions and millions of music, and it's insane. And it's not their fault. It's just they're getting music all day. So your album that you're pitching to them might get lost in the bunch, and you may not hear from them, or maybe you will. There are those moments or times where people get lucky, which is great. But I say, and I recommend, whoever's starting out, when you're first starting out, music supervisors are probably I wouldn't recommend it. It's probably not the best way to go. And so that is my second con. All right, my third con. So I know I just spoke about music supervisors, which leaves music libraries, right? I know there's sync agencies and that whole thing. I haven't experienced that, so I'm not going to speak on that whole route. I'm just going to speak on what I know of. So music library submissions are cool, and that's the way I've been doing it. But I will say a con getting into this, and when you're first beginning, there's a way that you're emailing and getting in contact with libraries, and you have to kind of know that in the beginning. And obviously that's like how do you know what library to reach out to? You can Google music library, and there's like millions of libraries, right? And then you got to submit. Each library has a different way of submitting. You submit, you may or may not hear back. The general rule is you reach out to one library, wait a couple weeks, and then reconnect or follow up with them and ask like, hey, I pitched this album, and I wanted to see if you had any interest. And if after those 2 weeks you decide to move to a different library, you want to give them a heads up. And I feel like this is the only way and the best way to do it, because you want to kind of give them a courtesy email like, hey, I understand that you're busy, but I'm going to be moving on to a different library, or I'm going to be pitching this album to a different library. And so that's the route that I've done in the past. And so every other producer and composer that I've come across and I've spoken to, that is the way that they're doing it. And so that process itself is obviously, it takes time, because 2 weeks. So you're basically doing 2 libraries a month. I know some other producers say you should do more. I haven't done that. So again, I'm not going to speak on, things that I haven't done, but what's worked for me is reaching out to one library. But again, that submission process is a lot in terms of time, because you just created this whole album, and you're, eager and excited to get, to find the library a home. And it's like, all right, I gotta wait. It's the waiting game, and it's cool. It's okay. It's cool, but it's also like tough. And so I say that to say, like, I can see that as a con. I wish there was a quicker way, but that's the only way that I've been doing it. If you have any other way, let me know in the comments, but that's what I've been doing, and it's been working. So again, if you're getting into sync, this is something that you kind of have to consider and be mindful of. And just, again, it's not a con. It's more like you should know, or, have this in the back of your head when you're submitting and getting into sync. All right. Another con and a need to know. This is definitely a need to know. I didn't know this is how it worked, but So when it comes to payments, I know that is a big question in sync. I had this question when I first started out. How does payments work? So you get paid every 3 months quarterly from your publishing, whether you have BMI or ASCAP. They pay you quarterly, and you get like an update. You get an email like, hey, you received some funds. And that's where you see what show or what ad or whatever has picked up your music. That is probably the biggest like question I had, because I was like, do you get paid right away? Like, do you, I don't know, does it show reach out to you? I had so many questions. I couldn't really wrap my head around how this whole process worked. So again, that's how it works. So you pitch it to a library. They pitch it to a show that they've probably worked with before, and then, somehow it gets placed. So say if it gets placed today for a show, for a VH1 show, I wouldn't see the money and even know that I've gotten placed 2 months from now. And so I think a lot of people think like this is like a get rich and quick, like I'm going to get this big placement and I can quit my 9 to 5. No, it is not that. It is not something that you can just submit to a library. And another thing, and maybe this should have been another like point, but if you're accepted to a library, that doesn't mean you're automatically placed on a show. Like your song can sit in there for some time, and obviously they're going to shop it around, but it could sit in there for like 2-3 months, maybe even more, until it's picked up. So that, again, that's kind of like a quick, tip. But going back to payments, you get paid every 3 months. You're not getting paid as soon as, you place your song in a library. In certain cases, I have heard like certain libraries pay you up front. There could be like an upfront fee for creating a specific album or music for them. There are cases that like that. Again, I haven't experienced that, but what I have experienced is every 3 months are your quarterly payments. Another con, and some need to know information, when you do get placed, which I hope everyone gets placed, when you do get placed, you do not know what, like, what show, but you don't know like the timestamps, which I feel like hopefully that improves in the future. I don't know if I'm reading my BMI statements wrong, but every time I look, like, it'll show me how long, like I had one placement and it showed me like it was used for like 35-40 seconds and that was it. So it doesn't show you, it shows you how much you get paid for the duration, the name of the show, the network, that whole thing, but it doesn't show you like what, the timestamp of when it was used. Because like when I first got placed, I was like super excited, and I was like, oh, I want to see, I was curious, like, how is this being used? And so I ended up like skipping through the show. It was like an hour-long show, so it was kind of tough to do it, but I ended up finding it. But it was incredibly hard because it was like at like 47.3 seconds, like, you know what I mean? Like, it was very 47 minutes and like 30 seconds. It was like very like specific. And again, like I had like 30 seconds, which is why I caught it, because it was a longer queue. But had it been like 5 or 10 seconds, that's like, you would probably have to watch the whole show. So again, I wish there was like a way, and maybe there are, if there is any other resource out there that'll provide that, let me know. I guess that's another con, because obviously as a producer, you're like super happy to hear your work on television. You want to see how it's used. How does it blend with the scene? If they use a different part of your song, like, did they use the stems, not the complete track? All these questions, like, for me, that's what I had in my head, and that's what, I was trying to look for. But so timestamps is definitely like something I hope that improves in the future. That's my other con. So my last con, and it's not a con, it's kind of, again, a need to know. So maybe all of these are just something you need to know going in. So when you get accepted into a library, most libraries have a specific way of entering the tracks into the database, and we will get to this, but you're here as a producer to serve, and so you have to make sure you do your part and your due diligence on getting all the stems correct. And even certain libraries, I do this for every library, but filling out metadata, because that's tedious work. But you want to do this as a producer, to do all the tedious work, so you make their jobs a lot easier. So the tedious work can be a lot, especially after you knock out a whole album, and you gotta you definitely have to list everything, like all the instrumentations, BPM, temp, BPM, key, the mood. Certain libraries ask for like, what does this sound like? So all of those things you kind of want to do. I would recommend on staying organized, which is something we're going to talk about in a little bit. But staying organized is going to help with all that, but it does require you to do some tedious work on your end when you are submitting to a library and after it's accepted. I don't think it's a con. It's just one of those things that you're kind of helping out the library. You're partnering with them and they're putting your music out there. I think, the least you can do is fill out the metadata and get all the stems right, make sure they have, all the, sample rates that's required. Again, that's something you kind of want to know, for sync. So the first pro, I would say, is understanding how to bring value to the table. I think in every industry and everything that you do, you should always look to bring value to the table. I mentioned this on my last con, but this is on the flip side, kind of shifting your perspective. You kind of want to make sure like you present yourself in a way where you're ready to serve and you're ready to help and partner and bring value to the partnership that whether it's a library, music supervisor, sync agent, whatever route you want to go into. I think, and even in the music industry, you want to be the person that has something to offer. It's not just me. What can you do for me? How can you place me on this show? And like, it's literally like a partnership. Like, hey, I'm going to help, you do metadata, so it'll make your job as a library easier, so you can focus on some other producers and composers who are maybe submitting to your live. Like, it's just literally serving. Even music supervisors, one of the things that I learned is like, you're not just emailing, hey, you work on this show, I have music for it, here it is, let me know if it's like, it's very just self-centered. And I think with sync, I realized that, oh wow, you can come off like that. And I don't think people mean to, but it is important for a producer or an artist to know, like, if you are communicating with anyone, but specifically in sync, you want to have hey, I'm ready to serve mentality. I'm here to create what you need. I'm here to meet if you have a brief, or if your library is missing this certain genre, I'm going to learn how to make this so I can fill that need and fill that void in your library. So if you have that mentality and that perspective, I think you'll be easier to work with. One, two, it just makes you a better person. I just believe in being a good person. So I think, again, that'll go a long way. And I think that'll create great relationships. All right. My second pro for sync licensing is the improvement as a music producer. So I mentioned this in a few of my videos, that when you are into sync, when you get into sync and you have some library, submissions, and they get picked up from libraries, and you're getting briefs. These briefs are pushing you to be like a whole different type of producer. You have to really be intentional about, all right, that A sections, right? Or that formula, and then understanding like what instruments go where, what time do they drop, what time do they come back in, transitions, that sting ending, all of those things I feel like has made me a better producer, and has made me produce with intent. I just did a funk album, and I literally listened to a whole bunch of funk music for like a week, and I was like super dope and interesting because it pushed my brain to like think, all right, how can I make this sound like funk? Like when somebody hears this, it's like, oh, James Brown. I think again that is a super huge pro for sync, because it challenges you to push yourself and to kind of think outside of the box. All right, my third pro, after outside of the production space and understanding how to pitch and all that, I think one of the dopest things about sync is the networking. So I'm part of PMA, and I actually attended the PMA conference in LA like a couple years ago, no, last year. It was really cool to see like all the different types of composers and what they do. Like there was video game composers, there was like movie trailers, people who do movie trailers, people who do ads. It was just super dope. And at that time I didn't have any placements, but it was just really cool to see all these people who just made all this different type of music, and you can kind of pick their brain, and and everybody was like down to earth, super down to earth, and it was just like really dope to see like people doing what I wanted to do at the time, and they were really just accepting. Everybody's been at the beginning stage where you're trying to get your foot in the door, and a lot of the producers and composers, they were super like dope and gave me advice. People sometimes give you opportunities that you would never get just sitting at home. I've connected with so many like dope producers, and it was just really cool. So I would say like that's a pro, because sync licensing has been around for quite some time now, but I think there's a lot more light being shed on it. The other pro in sync, and this forced me to do this, is learning how to mix. When I first got into sync, it was all kind of like overwhelming. It was like, oh man, I got to produce this. I'm a musician, so like a lot of these things come easy to me. I can figure out, chord progressions and mood and all that. But one of the things that was scary to me, and what I was insecure about it when I first started, was learning how to mix and even master. Some of those things were very intimidating for me, and I definitely pushed myself. I learned. I watched YouTube tutorials. I read books. I did a lot of trial and error stuff, but I definitely feel like I'm at a way better place than I was when I first started, and I feel like that only happened because of sync. All right, so my next pro is understanding organization. That is one of the biggest things that'll help you so much in sync. So when I mean organization, is organizing your tracks, organizing folders, organizing your computer, just so you know where everything is, and you can pull things, you can send files when they're needed. Again, I mentioned this earlier, when you're sending stems, everything has to be like super organized. Metadata, all of those things have to be available, and like you're not stumbling across files, and like everything has to be super organized, because in the long run, when you complete a whole album and you have to get all the stems and all the stuff that they need, it helps out at the end of being organized, like saving the right names to your songs. Other pro for sync, I mentioned this a little earlier, but it's being productive. I think the productive, how do you even say that word? Productivity, is that how you say it? Yes, being productive. I'm gonna stick to that. So being productive is definitely a pro for sync. Again, I mentioned this earlier, where you can sit at your computer, and you're just kind of noodling around, which is cool. There's a time and a space for that, but I think with sync, like now, like those are really rare, that I really get to just sit and just create whatever. I appreciate those days, but oftentimes I'm getting briefs, so I'm sitting and there is like a target. There's like something I'm working towards. All right, and my last pro, above all, is, I think it's the most obvious one, is having your music on TV and film and ads and video games, trailers. Like that is probably the best pro there can be, right? Like it's like super cool to see like your music on TV. It's also like a cool thing to bring up in a conversation with friends or family or anyone. Like, oh, you know, because this happened to me one day, and somebody was like, oh, I was watching Love and Hip Hop, and I was like, oh, I have some music placed on there, and they were like, whoa, like, and I think that is a super dope feeling. There is like a fulfillment of knowing like you're meeting the need for a network, and they're broadcasting it alongside with your music. So I just always, I'm grateful for this industry, and I'm just going to continue to improve and continue to get better. So hopefully this helps you out. Hopefully this list of things help you out on your journey. Again, I understand, I completely understand how when you're first starting out, it is incredibly overwhelming. Don't know where to start. And it's just like, how does this happen? Is this realistic? I'm here to tell you it is definitely realistic. You can do it. You can push through. Again, if you want some advice and help, feel free to reach out to me. The link is in the description. Even if you don't reach out, do your due diligence, study, continue to create, continue to arrange, continue to just watch different networks and see what's working, what type of music they have. Reach out to libraries, network, build relationships, and I think you should be good. Again, hopefully this was helpful. If you found any value in this, I would love if you would subscribe, share, like, comment. Let me know where you are with your journey, and let me know what you would like to see me talk about, so I can, kind of just put some more content together. So until next time, be great.